Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. This is episode number 78, dedicated to a man who on May 5th, 1978, became the 13th player to join the 3,000 Hits Club, Mr. Pete Rose. And as always, thank you for listening and downloading to another episode of the podcast. On today's episode, we have Mr. Josh Lazano joining me of the Benchwarmers and Burners podcast to talk about the NBA MVP race. The NBA season, just right when COVID-19 started halting everything that was going on in sports, we had about a month left of the NBA season, and we were about to really discuss who was going to win the NBA MVP. But everything stopped. Basketball stopped. College basketball stopped. The NFL is still going on currently because they're not currently in season. I do believe Roger Goodell would probably halt things, would probably want to halt that operation because of what's going on in our country and the CDC, Donald Trump, the government, whatever it is, your state officials, maybe your mayor. Things are being slowed down, halted, and saying no large gatherings. And I guarantee that Roger Goodell would join suit, would follow with everybody else, and shut down the operation of the NFL. With the NBA season being halted, nobody knows when it'll come back. The one thing that has been speculated is that when the NBA season does come back, fans may not be there. And could you imagine, this would be odd, watching an NBA basketball game with no fans there? I mean, literally, the only people that are there are the players, the coaches, the media members, photographers, and cameramen. That would be it. Maybe some family members, but that's it. That's it. Be very, very weird, very, very odd. I've actually had the privilege of playing in Bankers Life Fieldhouse, the home of the Indiana Pacers, after the Pacers played the Knicks. Oh, this was probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. I did it 2 or 3 years in a row. And what happened was at the end of the game, a lot of people from the churches, some guys were actually pastors of the churches there that were represented. You would go down to the court, you would change your clothes, go out to the court, and then play a pickup game. I think it was 10-minute quarters at that time. And you realize two things when you're on that court. One, it is big. And two, we are not in shape to play on that size of a court every single day or multiple times a week. And ultimately, when I'm there playing in the game, and I'm there with some of my buddies, some of my friends, we're talking trash, playing back and forth. Some of us play pickup basketball every Wednesday, so we knew how each other played. But there were fans there. There were some people that knew us there, and it was fine. We were perfectly fine in that kind of environment. But when you have an NBA athlete, a professional athlete who was used to playing in sold-out arenas, 17 to 20,000 people every single night. Sometimes you have a drum line in there. So you have music going on over the speakers. You have broadcasters there. You're used to the noise. It'd be very, very odd, very, very unusual for us to sit here and watch, or for the players to play in a game or play in an arena that there were no fans in. The players get used to the noise. The players get used to the back and forth. Some players even get used to the trash talk with the fans in the stands. Take all that away, it's a different dynamic, and ultimately, no noise, that affects you, no silence, it'll affect you as much as a lot of noise will. So I don't know, I sure hope it doesn't get to that point where there are no fans in the stands, but I sure know that whenever the NBA comes back, baseball comes back, whenever golf, we finally have the Masters, whenever sports come back in general, we can go back to living our lives like normal, we will all be happy. Of course, we would love to be in the arena whenever the NBA comes back, or be in the ballpark whenever baseball comes back, but if that can't happen, we will all be happy for us to be able to go home and watch sports every single night instead of reruns on TV. Yeah, reruns are great for some people. I love them. I watch them all the time, but there's nothing like live games every single day. Let's go ahead and take a trip to Las Vegas, Nevada to enjoy my fun conversation with Mr. Josh Lazano of the Benchwarmers and Burners podcast. Hey, Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jay, good pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I got to ask you one quick question before we start diving into sports and your podcast specifically. Are you a person that has been hoarding the toilet paper?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I've actually been hunting for some toilet paper. I've been, how about you, man?
No, not at all. Actually, interesting situation that you asked me that. I had to go buy my parents some toilet paper because they couldn't find any. So it was a weird thing there. Yeah. Like, I had enough, but they didn't have any. Is it out where you are? People still, are you guys on lockdown out there? I know it's different around the country.
Yeah, so out here in Vegas, no, governor put the shutdown, but it's not like a full-on quarantine. People are still going out. Basically, all the essentials. So Vegas essentials, like liquor stores are still open, dispensaries are still open. Toilet paper's low though.
Unfortunate,
Hey,
man. That's one thing.
yeah,
Say it
it's the
again.
city of lights. Yeah, they got
Yeah,
their
man.
priorities.
Yeah, I do understand that. I had a buddy that was in Cali, and he said the same thing. He was like, they could have a vacation as much as they could, but all the dispensaries out there were still open as well. It was kind of priorities are one thing, and they're one thing's more important than some people say the other thing is. Um, your podcast, I recently came across it. I forget if it was Instagram or Twitter, and you do a very good
Hmm.
job of having different guests on and having like roundtable style sometimes, talking about different topics in sports.
Hmm.
When did you start it, and what pushed you to start it?
Oh, started about I want to say month and a half ago. What pushed me to start it was I host a radio show on the weekends, and FCC regulations and whatnot. It's cool. You learn a lot, but you could never really express yourself fully or do the kind of content that you really want to do, especially because a radio show you gotta say things that fit the sponsors and whatnot. So I just wanted the freedom of it, and my time studying and covering sports, I just met a lot of interesting people, and then I thought this was another way to meet more people, just like how we stumbled upon each other and listened to each other's podcast. Jay.
Yeah, definitely. How? Because a lot of people, especially when before I started a podcast, I used to listen to radio all the time. More so your regular AM FM radio versus XM, but they have a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
freedom. But how did your radio hosting the show? How did that prepare you for hosting the podcast? And then how was the podcast different from what you've learned from your regular show you host on the weekends?
Oh, so it does transition well. You do learn interview skills, but the nice thing that is the major difference between a podcast and a radio shows you need to fit with your show within the drop sets, if that makes any sense. So if you guys are firing something off, we're shooting this, we're talking about something really interesting, but we got to add at 8:25, so we kind of have to cut it. And then the nice thing too is with podcasts, no one knows when your breaks are, if that makes any sense. So we could stop recording, take a 15-20 minute break, maybe a game's on or something interesting, and then go back to recording, but we can just splice that together. No one knows that. On live air, it's a little bit different.
It is. It definitely is. I've learned that myself with my show. Even early on, I listened to a few podcasts, and then
Mm-hmm.
one that I listened to, there actually are like designated like breaks. Like it's actually like more of a radio style where there's segments, but there's no there are ads in there, but it's not like I have to go get this ad in, or I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say this sponsor's name, or I have to say the call letters at this time. Nothing like that, but it's still like your segments and things like that. And you do get a lot more freedom. And I heard one person say, the podcast space, you may even realize this, is a little bit more intimate because you're able to be,
Oh yeah.
like you said, you can express yourself in a way that you can't really do that on regular radio.
Yeah, it is a lot more intimate because it is it's a little bit more loyal of a fan base, if that makes any sense. Because you could have a social media presence for radio and whatnot, but it's kind of like there's always the middleman, there's always the station. But since it's like majority of like for example, you're doing the recording, the editing, and the publishing yourself, Jay. So it is kind of like your baby, just like for my show it is too. So whenever you do get those fans, and it feels like it's a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the I had no idea, and I'm sure you can back this up as well. I had no idea how much editing and then how much just prep work, and
Yeah.
then having to have a social media presence. I had no idea what those behind the scenes of a podcast or even the radio show, what they deal with. And I know the producers on a radio show, they're underpaid. They're not paid what they're worth because they're doing a lot of the harder work. They're not the ones talking and hosting the show. But man, as you know, Josh, that leg work, that behind the scenes work, it can be tough.
Oh yeah, it is 100%. Especially to shout out to all their producers out there because we usually look at they're hiding behind the curtain, but they're makes it going. So when you start doing it yourself, there's just so much work because recording and talking with everyone, that's the fun part, and that's usually the shortest part. But then the editing, especially too, because you gotta listen. Like if you have an hour recording, you gotta listen to it. Then the editing, depending how quick you are, that could take a couple hours, and then publishing, and then you got to build promos for it, and then get it out. So it is a lot of work. So if it's something that you don't enjoy doing, then it's definitely something that can feel like a grind.
Yeah, definitely can. COVID-19 has shaken everything, not just sports,
Hmm.
but everyone around the world, even to the point that there was a literal earthquake. I'm not being facetious or making a joke at all. A little earthquake in Utah earlier this week, 5.7 on the Richter scale,
Yeah.
and no one even I live in Indiana. Nobody out here about it. What is the scene about out there in Vegas, especially around sports? How has COVID-19 affected you guys out there?
Oh, it's affected us drastically, and it's funny you bring up that earthquake in one of our neighboring cities, Carson City. They felt it. Then there's pictures of all their grocery stores. There's and I'll send it to you on Twitter too, of like soda bottles exploded on the ground from it. So that was such a minor news because we're still reeling from COVID-19, but it's a big deal because the NFL draft was supposed to be here. That got canceled. March Madness is a huge deal here in Vegas. All the casinos, everything, all the sports bars. That's it. People gambling, the sports books. The sports books looks like a ghost town. So it's really hit the Vegas really hard, especially too because the thing is when people need to tighten up their wallets, understandably, because you always got to take care of your family. One of the first things you always try and cut out is your vacation. And then now too for people on business trips or whatnot, like other sports reporters are, I'm going to go to Vegas, I'm going to go cover this team, and then now it's just gone. So
Yeah, it's shocking. It's very, very shocking. I've heard people say that first weekend of March Madness, the first and second round, that Thursday starting at 12 noon Eastern all the way through
mm-hmm.
Friday evening is wild. It's probably one of the wildest times out there in Vegas. How have you been able to cope with no college basketball right now when this is a heartbeat of what college basketball fans look forward to?
I think just like, I mean, you just kind of have to accept it. It's rough, especially too because you understand NBA because they have players that were infected, and then same thing college too. You understand because it's the safety, but then now it starts reeling into things that haven't even happened. Like baseball now is getting postponed, NFL. So we're really starting to see the effects of it. I mean, all you can really just do is accept it. I mean, I tell people, you don't have to be happy about it, but at least understand why.
Right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was at my parents' house earlier today, and we had lunch there, and I had to come back home. But while I was there, we were rewatching. I think it was the Patriots and Raiders 2001, 2002 maybe. When they had the Tuck Rule game. And
Oh yeah.
my dad was like, "What is this?" I said, "This is a game from the early 2000s when Tom Brady faced the Raiders, and the Patriots faced the Raiders in the playoffs." He's like, "Is this like from?" And I told him the year afterwards. I got the story mixed up, but he's like, "Is this from the 80s or 90s?" I said, "Dad, this is like 18, 19 years ago." But that's just how
Uh-huh.
crazy it is right now because we don't think that NFL Network or even some of these other networks will be replaying these older games. But that's just how thirsty we are, literally, for sports. Have you been finding yourself just like rewatching old stuff to just kind of fill that void?
Oh yeah, I have too. I mean, I think it was a great idea, fantastic idea by the NFL Network and the NBA to release their both versions of their league pass, so people can just rewatch old games, which is what you need to do. But I think to just relive these old games, especially because you're trying to get into March Madness. So UNLV, I got to be watching UNLV getting me something at least close to March Madness experience. What about you?
Yeah, I'm currently, as we're talking, I'm watching the replay of the 2019, last year's championship, Texas Tech and Virginia. But I've just been finding any way to get any type of void, playing more 2K. I still have NCAA football 14 on my Xbox 360. People make fun of
Bro,
me for still having.
classic.
Oh yeah, people make fun of me for still having a 360. I'm like, I literally have it for one game, and when I found a way to try to get updated rosters, I'm golden. I'll just keep playing until the game stops running for me. But I've been watching older games. I've watched older games all the time. That's normally like my bread and butter when there's say the summertime when it's baseball, a lot of baseball on. But man, at some point I'm gonna find myself watching more Netflix than normal because watching older games at some point you want to get past that and watch live stuff, but there's no live stuff on right now. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, there's nothing. And then it's funny too because then I know like ESPN, they're kind of grasping at straws. They're trying to do what they can. They were doing like a bratwurst eating competition, and then it's funny too because I gotta give it from the and then they were doing like a 15-minute history of bratwurst. Because when there's no content on, especially too you just got to find out what you can. But then it's crazy because then you're seeing it from everyone, like Sportsbook too. I always got to give you the Vegas perspective. William Hill was sending me emails. They're like, hey man, like, don't worry, like we're gonna figure out some things. You guys are doing some crazy stuff, like they're having you, they're like telling you that on like really obscure horse racing or like Lego soccer or darts, and then anytime there's tennis, at least trying to get something so people have something.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. I mean, you got to find something to fill that void. I know ESPN is they started a bracket of where they're ranking the greatest of all time, greatest college basketball players of all time. I think all these are D1 players, but it's the men and women, they're combined. So the first round, you may have a Cheryl Miller facing up against a great like Pistol Pete. I don't think that's like the exact matchup, but it's just literally what they're doing to try to fill the void. The bracket itself, I mean, you're going to disagree with the bracket. I don't think Pistol Pete in their bracket is a 13th seed in any of the regions. I think with him being the all-time leading scorer in Division I history, averaging 44 points a game, I mean, I would think that he would be a lot higher than that. But I mean, it's for fun. I mean, and they're utilizing social media to vote for. So it's a great way for them to interact with social media. Then also fun for people like you and I to kind of just go back and forth with stuff like this.
Yeah, I also think so too. I agree with you on that Pistol Pete too. He's an absolute legend. You got to give him some respect. But I also think it's just recency bias. So
yeah,
I feel like especially too with social media, they understand that a lot of it is to the younger. It is the younger crowd, so they kind of have to be having the more recent names because you talk to these kids later, and it's like I don't really understand. Like I get he's good, you guys talk about him, but was he really that good? He's not that great of an NBA player. You know how it is with all these younger guys. So
yeah, recency bias. Not what he passed away before any of them were alive. I get it. I understand it. Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? It seems like that's the in thing right now. Well, do I have the people for you? Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and extremely easy to use. And now, Anchor will match with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid for podcasting right away. To get started, go to anchor.fm/start. Once again, that's anchor.fm/start. As crazy as this is, I was recording with someone recently, and I said, it's been 2 weeks since we haven't had sports. Sports were here, I think, as recent as, March 11th or March 12th. I forget when the NBA shut down. I forget when the college conferences finally said we're going to stop playing everything. But it was March 11th or March 12th, about 10 days ago, about a week and a half. Everything stopped. And in the heart of the NBA season, we had about a month left. And the NBA MVP race was heating up, and it was getting good. It seems like to a lot of people, it's either LeBron or Giannis, one of the two. But I went back and I went to ESPN.com to look at some of their preseason rankings, and they had 11 people. They had 11 people in their preseason rankings that say they have a chance, at least a shot at winning the MVP this year. I'm going to go through this 11, then ask you kind of after hearing this, what your thoughts on about how the preseason rankings went, and then how kind of the season progressed. Number 1, they had Giannis. 2 was Steph. 3 was LeBron. 4 was Embiid. 5 was Anthony Davis. 6, Nikola Jokic. 7, Kawhi Leonard. 8, Damian Lillard. 9, James Harden. 10, Kyrie. Then 11, Paul George. I added Russ at 12 just to have him there. Then I added Ben Simmons. Now, I know Ben Simmons coming into the season wasn't really kind of he may not be as high as top 10, but if he had a breakout year, he definitely had a shot to win it. Thinking about what I just went over, I know I said it kind of quickly. How do you think preseason predictions via ESPN.com and their writers went? And then how do you think the season kind of unfolded with the MVP?
I think it's always hard too when you make those long lists, and a lot of times that they do it, there's just things that I just sometimes they just the list so they can get people to argue with it, because and then for example going into it, I get played half a season last year. You can make the argument that he was hurt, but majority of it was because the Pelicans were sitting him on back-to-backs and only giving him around like after the whole fiasco of getting traded. So I definitely thought he would have been higher. And then there's just some interesting choices on there too. Like Ben Simmons, if he had a breakout season, I can see it. But Ben, basically, since he was a rookie, has been incredibly stagnant, which is disappointing because I think Ben Simmons is such a phenomenal player. He was a great player at LSU too. He's been so consistent, haven't seen any real growth. And then Westbrook too. I respect the Westbrook. Would have found it hard for him to be top MVP, especially because he was with Harden. I definitely think they both could coexist, and we're starting to see it now that the on small with pockets. But I just feel like there's two things that you need to win MVP. You need the narrative, so you need the story behind, and then you also need the wins and statistics. So I just felt like it had to be almost my pick would have been like Giannis beginning of the season.
Okay.
And then probably one thing that was surprising though is I don't think anyone, and even ESPN and you, thought this, but I definitely didn't, as I didn't expect Luka to be such a strong candidate early in the season. He's definitely tailed off after he started getting them calf injuries, but man, he came out hot.
Yeah, no, man. I like Luka, but going into the season, you kind of didn't know. You were still trying to see how him and Porzingis kind of meshed and how they kind of gelled, and you didn't know how that chemistry, how that connection was going to go. When I was looking at this list here, Giannis, Steph, LeBron, 1, 2, and 3, Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's a guy. I'm just going off of what the preseason rank said. I'll get to what I think now in a minute. But Joel Embiid, as a guy, as a player, as a big man, he should be as dominant. He probably should be the most dominant guy in the league. Give him the ball. He's big enough. He's wide enough. He has the base to just give him the ball and then dominate. Now, if it's not just him scoring all the time, he can shoot a little bit, learn how to pass better out of the post. But he has the tools, physically gifted, and the body that he's been given to be very good and have a chance at winning the MVP. I think with him, is a lot of it. It's his diet, it's his conditioning. He says he's changing things. He says that I'm working. I want to be this. I want to be that. The process is still working, but it seems like that process is literally stalled right now. And no matter what, Ben Simmons and him being stagnant and all those things that go into Ben Simmons being the guy that he is, I think Embiid needs to take a bigger role with this team and not just talk, but just play harder and play a whole lot and play more consistent than he is. And he's only played 44 games out of a possible 65. I get it. You got a big body. I get it that big men get hurt somewhat easier because they're carrying more weight and they're when they fall, gravity pulls them down very, very hard. But I think Embiid, for not just him to take the next step, but for the 76ers as a whole to take the next step, I think he has to really lift his game to a level that he may not even think he can get to, but have to get that far. Jokic, I'm east of the Mississippi. I'm more on the eastern side, Eastern Conference. Jokic to us over here, we don't really talk about it. But I am sure out there, especially where you live, he gets a lot of talk because he does everything. And I think, Josh, you be thinking like at some point this guy's going to get some more recognition just because he is that good.
I think so too. I'm glad that the thing about Embiid, I do agree with you. Embiid, when you watch him and just how he's able to physically dominate, especially with how small the league's getting now, you're just watching him and you're just like, Giannis is like the new Shaq, and I understand that. But when I first saw Embiid, I was like, this is the new Shaq. He's just a monster. He's just so much more athletic, longer than everyone too. He could take the ball up. But I was just surprised. I mean, the Sixers have been just disappointing all season. I also feel like that's just brand and the way that he constructed the team. But hey, if it would have worked, if having Al Horford as a going so, calling him a genius, but it's not. So that's just how easy it can be. But the thing about Jokic is, you are right. Loves him in the West Coast. He's like, especially too because his play style. The passing is great. The thing about Jokic is I feel like once his conditioning gets better, I think he's going to just take over the league because he's phenomenal. It's just his issue is sometimes he doesn't have the conditioning and then also his just aggression because they'll be that cheap and Jokic has like rebounds and sometimes we get a bucket. He's almost Dirk Nowitzki-esque with the way he shoots the ball. And same thing with his floaters. He's super ambidextrous, little flips and whatnot, and you sometimes can't tell if that's a shot or a pass, and then it just goes in. So he looks like he plays so out of control, but he's the most in control player in the league.
He is definitely. I think going into this season, there was one player, well, two people I was looking forward to kind of take more of a leadership role. Well, one specifically was Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard's a different style of leader. Kawhi Leonard, even in Toronto, he didn't lead. He didn't lead like a LeBron or a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant, the greats that we watch and we've watched forever, to say, hey, this is how a leader is, and they lead in that instance. And Kawhi's just different. But it seems like Kawhi Leonard, even though the Clippers are really good, I think they're second right now in the West. I don't know what he can do with his personality to propel himself to win MVP, unless his team goes like 70-plus wins and he averages 30 points a game. I know that now there are times with him missing. He's missed 13 games so far, not playing the back-to-backs, trying to save himself for the postseason. I do understand that hurts him, but he may have to be like, hey, man, like LeBron is this year. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I don't care if I have to play more offense, or I don't care if I have to play more defense. I don't care what it is. If I have to play every single game, including all the minutes of overtime if we go into OT, I don't mind. This is what's needed, not just for my team to win, but for me to for more people to recognize exactly how I am as a player. What were your expectations from Kawhi going into the year, and how have you kind of observed him so far this season?
He's actually surpassed it. I was thinking, I kind of jumped on the hype too. Everyone that was saying, the Clippers, they're so deep that they're going to do a lot of load management, which is crazy because if you've been following it, Kawhi's actually been playing more minutes and he's played more games this year than he did on Toronto. So he's been really carrying the load with Paul George's injury, which is crazy too because he had the double shoulder surgery, but it's actually been lower body injuries. I think Kawhi's been phenomenal. My thing about Kawhi, though, I just feel like it's just the durability, like you said. That's why it's really hard for him to always be in those MVP races. Plus, the last, so you look at Kawhi's whole history, Kawhi good teams too. Yeah, so that's why it's just always so hard to separate it. So if you look at like why Giannis had it, because sometimes Chris Middleton gets so disrespected that he's put into like a Tobias Harris tier. So that's why when people are like, oh, the Bucks are almost going to get 70 wins, well, there has to be opposed to Kawhi on Toronto. They were like, oh, like, yeah, they're doing really well. Siakam's a budding star, whatnot. Because you can make an argument, him and Jamal are the greatest six men to ever play in the NBA.
Yeah.
And then from there you got Paul George, who's second in MVP voting last year. So it's just hard I feel like Kawhi's not going to be able to get it until he has a team of lesser talent, if that makes any sense. Or honestly, if they would have they would have been the number one in the West. If they would have basically been what the Lakers are doing now, then I think Kawhi would have been in the argument all year. But because they weren't, he's not.
Yeah, definitely. I know. I think right now, when those people, the MVP race is going to come down to Giannis and LeBron James. LeBron, year 17, 35 years old. Some people are like, I heard one person say you can't really use that to describe LeBron, but those are vital aspects to LeBron in his NBA career that can be used as someone to say, hey, man, LeBron, his age, his durability, how long he's played in the NBA, those are things that actually characterize him and say, kind of help him to show how good he has played this year. And I think with LeBron, there has been LeBron fatigue, but LeBron also down the stretch, and I think it was the Clippers game. I forget if it was the Clippers or the Bucks, but it was the Clippers. It was on a Sunday. The Clippers game that they played, I think it was March the 8th, later in the afternoon here on the East. LeBron kind of in that fourth quarter, he was like, give me the ball. I don't care what's going to happen. Offense and defense, he was kind of just saying, I'm going to propel my team to win. And it was almost like, I'm doing what everyone has been telling me I need to do my entire career. And it was almost like a statement game. Like I'm going up against a guy that people say can guard me. I'm going up against a team that people say is better than my team. And at the time, I think late in the third quarter, the Lakers were down, and all of a sudden, the Clippers started to fall. The Lakers started to pick up their defense, and then he got a great lift from Avery Bradley, and the rest is history. And I think with LeBron right now, he's like, I am doing what you want me to do, and I better get this award. While Giannis is like, hey, man, my team has the best record in the NBA. Give me some credit. How do you think those two go together when it comes to the MVP race?
The thing about LeBron, though, is he did pick it up. I think it was night and day. People were saying, LeBron has been a little bit more lackadaisical on defense. That is true last year. This year, he's definitely picked it up a lot more. But especially that second half after that All-Star, came out just like a man possessed. He came out playing like it was playoff mode. He was guarding Giannis and Kawhi the entire game, which Bucks in Milwaukee, and also when they played the Clippers the first two times. So you could definitely tell he turned it on. I still think it's just hard because even when I start thinking that, like LeBron's not the best player in the league, which I think is normal. I think that's just how humans think. You're like, man, he's getting up there in age, 17th season. And then when he starts doing things like that, you're just like, I'm sorry, he still is. Like, just like the only reason I feel like you would say he's not is if you just have like a vendetta against him. But if you're just a pure basketball fan, because the only real issue that LeBron had when he was younger was that he couldn't consistently space the floor. Now he's just pulling stuff out of his hat. He's just pulling up from the logo like he's Curry sometimes. It's just crazy. I think that the thing about it is they complement each other well. I think Anthony Davis is a phenomenal player. I think he's probably going to end up being defensive. I had Rudy Gobert. I mean, the Jazz were fighting break. Because then you're looking at it and you're like, still got to give it to Giannis. Just if they would have kept going, then get a case, James.
Yeah, I think with Giannis, I was leaning more towards LeBron earlier in the season. I've never really been the biggest LeBron fan, but as he's gotten older, and I've literally seen his progression, and I remember early in his career where his jump shot was trash, it was horrendous, and then he kept getting better. Now he wasn't afraid to shoot him early on, which that was kind of a testament to him to say like, I know I can't shoot, but I know where the NBA is going. He kind of projected the NBA to go where it is now. And that was what, 17 years ago, where you still had your Chris Webbers, your Kevin Garnett's, you still had your bigger style guys that were playing on the block more. And now it's like, hey man, if you're 6'9" or taller, forget posting up. You're going outside. And I was like, LeBron's three-point shot has kept getting better year after year after year. And then I look over to the East, I see the Milwaukee Bucks, and every time they're playing, they're beating somebody. It didn't matter if they're playing the Warriors, who everyone's beating this year, which understandably so, or if you're playing the Heat, which actually, if the NBA comes back, that would be a tough matchup because their defense is going to be one that would actually kind of slow down Giannis in the Bucks' offensive attack. But it didn't matter if he's playing the Lakers, the Clippers. It didn't matter who Giannis is playing. He showed up, and it wasn't just him showing up. It was everybody on the Bucks saying, hey, this guy's our leader. This guy's unstoppable. This guy is a guy that he's a freak, and he keeps getting better. Yeah, three-point shot or not, Giannis doesn't care because he continues to kill. And I personally am leaning more towards Giannis than LeBron because Giannis continues to get better. And then also his team is best record in the NBA with 53-12 right now.
Yeah, no, Giannis has been – what I think that's just been crazy about Giannis too is what happened – basically what Kawhi did in the East when he was in Toronto is he just dismantled all those East teams, and that was a gauntlet. The shot run around the world against the Sixers. I thought that what was going to happen was the Sixers were going to look at themselves, and then Love's in the gym, Ben Simmons was going to get a shot, Embiid, because after all that, it was Giannis. Giannis was the one, which people forget. Giannis too, in that he locked himself in the gym all summer. He came out with a respectable 3-point. You're 100% right. The Bucks team, they're all players playing, I feel like, than what everyone expected. Everyone kind of knew what Chris Middleton is. I feel like people always forget that Brook Lopez was a 5 to 6 time All-Star on the Nets, phenomenal player. But then guys like DiVincenzo, all the other guys, George Hill, I feel like whenever I watch the Bucks, I don't see George Hill miss. I feel like I never seen George Hill miss a three. But then when I saw one that came LeBron, now that's not me saying harder for Giannis than he did LeBron, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is all out of their mind, and I do believe it is the work ethic. Because you hear the going to the gym before everyone else, and then you do take after your leader, So
Yeah,
A little bit of it in the Lakers because LeBron's a very like buddy, like all brothers. You know what I mean? Don't get up, like someone will come pick you up, and then you see that with the Lakers. They're all really buddy, Jared Dudley. They all bought into it. So that's the types of leaderships you see there.
definitely. You mentioned George Hill, and I have my computer up right now. I'm fortunate enough to live in an area in a state where a lot of basketball players come from, really good ones. George Hill's being one of them. And I pulled up his stats. You talk about not missing. He's averaging 53% from the field, which is good. Most NBA players aren't able to do that. But then from 3-point land, he's averaging 48% right now. So it kind of goes with what you're saying about him just making all the shots, man. That's crazy numbers.
He hasn't missed. If you watch it, and then it's the same thing with Kyle. I mean, everyone knows how good Kyle Korver is, but when you just watch that Bucks team, you're like, this is crazy. I think you just have to give it to Giannis. And people also don't want to give it to Giannis is voter fatigue, which is understandable. The narrative that LeBron James is still a phenomenal basketball player in his old age, but I knew how good LeBron was going to come in. I didn't expect him to take that big of a drop off, and I feel like consistent. I really wish this season didn't get ended because if the Lakers just would have went on a tear, if it would have been like LeBron's greatest hits road tour. The Clippers again. He would have beat the Toronto, which the Lakers haven't beat him yet. But I think they would have got him the next time. If you just would have went on monster tear. Plus, Giannis with that knee injury, he was going to miss a couple of games because he hyperextended it. You just never know what could have happened, Jay.
No, you don't. You don't at all. So you mentioned something, but I got some questions I want to ask you quickly before we get out of here.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll start this now. Before we wrap this thing up, give me the first thought that comes into your head when you hear. I got 9 questions here for you. Then I'll give you some time at the end to promote your show. And if people want to connect with you, you have the liberty to mention that as well. First one, I'm going to change things up. Do you think the NBA will come back this season?
I think the NBA is going to come back. I just don't know in what capacity. I know that Silver said that 30-day minimum, but when you look at the timeline of how COVID-19 is affecting other countries and whatnot, I think it's going to be a little bit longer than that. I just think in the capacity of it, I think that maybe what's going to happen is they're just going to maybe 1 or 2 games before the playoffs, just so the guys aren't rushed to go into it. And then I think it's going to be a late start. It's going to affect everything. I think next season is going to be – it might I don't think the league wants to shorten it, but I think they might have to, like, cut out. They got to do a bunch of things.
Yeah, I think actually this may help the players out. So a lot of players have been saying they want a shortened season or no back-to-backs. And I think this actually may go against what the owners want, but be in favor of the players, which is kind of what the league is going towards. And the owners never want to go and lose money. But I think this actually may propel the NBA to start closer to Christmas and make Christmas Day like the start of their season, and then keep the rest of the season going at that trajectory. And then you can still end in middle of June, then have your award ceremony, which I can't stand personally, because they announced the NBA MVP at their ceremony instead of announcing it in the playoffs. But this may actually be in the players' favor. Unfortunate the virus happens and people are losing their lives because of a new virus out there, but it could be what pushes the league to say, hey, let's shorten the season. It makes more sense, not just for us, but it makes more not just for us as a league, but it makes more sense just for the players. That may be what pushes them to do that. Number 2, who's your favorite NBA player, current and then also of all time?
Ooh, I think me growing up a young Lakers fan in the early 2000s, it's almost impossible not to say Kobe Bean was probably my favorite growing up, especially too when your mind is young and malleable. Just hearing all the stuff that he would say, just the mama mentality, and I don't know, it's just easy to hero. You'd watch him and then walk out, pop it back in, play, hit a game winner with his left hand. Just things that made you believe if you was practicing what you preach. And then for current player right now, I think my favorite current player right now would have to be just for watching. I crazy because if you compare him to the timeline of what Steph Curry was doing this in college still, that he was still playing in Davidson, and then Trae Young is doing this against full-grown NBA men, and defense is always going to be a little bit of liability. But just from watching him, I'm just curious what he's going to what he's going to end up being, because he has like unlimited range, phenomenal handles. If you compare him to what Curry was at the same age, he almost surpasses him in every box. So and then the thing is, Curry's, even if you don't like him, he's the greatest shooter of all time. So it's like, all right, if this kid's already there, if you're comparing him at the same age, and it's like, I don't know what he's going to be when he hits 30. So
Yeah, definitely. A game you watched you'll never forget.
I think a game I'll watch and I'll never forget is actually very first time the Lakers and the Celtics faced off, and they just built that crazy big three with Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and it very last game of the finals, Lakers losing. I remember watching it. It was just sad. Because as a young kid, the only other time I really saw the Lakers lose like that was against the Pistons. But even then, in the back of my head, you could kind of tell that this is about to happen. The Pistons were just crazy the way that they were playing. Ben Wallace, all of them, Rip Hamilton, they were just playing out of their minds. You could tell the Lakers were so. But the Boston one, I actually thought we could have won, but they just outplayed us. So I'll never forget that. I remember watching that. That's why it was so good when we got them back after we beat Orlando and won again.
Definitely. Favorite vacation spot?
Vacation spot? I mean, anyone that always wants to come to Vegas, I always tell you to come here. But if you ever want to go out, I love visiting the Philippines. That's where I was born. Love seeing. I got a lot of family out there.
Gotcha. Place you want to go but have never been?
Place I want to go. I'll probably definitely want to visit Japan at some point. I just feel like. I feel like it's just a great country, and I just feel like there's a lot of good sights to see out there. Definitely want to go up the mountains, see some of the snow there.
Oh yeah, of course. Got to get out a little bit and go across the water and see what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
A job in sports you would love to have?
Oh, a job in sports I'd love to have. I think one day just to be able to commentate, regardless of what level it is. I mean, right now we're covering sports, and it's real fun to do the podcast. But I don't know about you. I think just being able to cover basketball, whether it's collegiate or professional, or even if it was G League, I think that would just be fun.
It would definitely be fun. A lot of fun. Three more for you. A game you would love to attend in any sport. Doesn't matter the level. Doesn't matter international. Just a game you would love to attend.
Huge tennis fan, but I feel like the way that they handle like the final stages of Wimbledon and just seeing it, how crazy all the fans are and whatnot, even though they're so polite. I think just to be able to experience that and step out of my sports comfort zone, I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, easily. Two more. Who would win in a game of one-on-one? Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Ooh, now that's tough. I think look at it, you always got to say the greatest NBA player of all time just because he's undefeated, the 6 rings. But sometimes when I watch LeBron, I think you can make the case that he is the greatest all-around basketball player. But if you got to go with one-on-one, I got to give it to Jordan. I just think if it's a team game, then I feel like LeBron would have the advantage. But if it's just one-on-one, then you take away. And I just feel like Jordan in a one-on-one that's just like Kobe in a one-on-one, you know? You don't want to bet against him.
No, not at all. Not at all. Last one. Give me a game you watched or positive memory of Kobe Bryant.
I think a positive memory would be probably it was his very last game. And I think that was really surreal because he just exactly how you thought Kobe would go out. He put up the crazy amount of points, but he also took a lot of shots. They ended up it was like a meaningless game. But then seeing all the celebrities like Shaquille O'Neal, Snoop Dogg, even though I was an adult at this time, like they're all giggling every time Kobe had a fadeaway to put him up. So it was just nice to see all these guys that we consider superstars in our eyes, and the way that they were looking at Kobe. So it really just a surreal moment.
Yeah, it was, man. I think you're the second person that I've brought on that's actually mentioned his last game that he played, because it was like you said, Kobe went out the way that we thought he would. Hey man, Josh, I appreciate you coming on. Take some time, tell people where they can listen to your podcast, and then if they want to communicate with you, you have the liberty to do that via social media.
Yeah. So I just got to say thank you, Jay, for having me. It was a real pleasure talking hoops and just sports in general. Um, the show's called The Benchwarmers and Burners. You can catch it on almost all streaming platforms. It's on Apple Music, Spotify. Sports podcast feature like former athletes, some budding sports psychologists, a few other journalists, professional bettors, not so professional bettors. The Instagram and the Twitter are the same. It's at the BNB pod. And then you could just check it out. But pretty much all I really got to talk about. What about you, Jay?
Say it again. I missed that.
Oh, I said that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else, Jay?
No, man, that's it, man. Josh, I appreciate you coming on, taking time out of your day. I know this COVID-19 has kind of changed all of our plans, but there's still the MVP race. MVP hasn't been crowned yet. And we see some phenomenal basketball. I'm glad you could come on and talk to me about that for a little bit today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Take care, all right? Thank you for having me.
And that's all she wrote. Once again, I want to thank Josh Lazano of the Benchwarmers and Burners podcast for coming on and joining me to talk about the NBA MVP race. And man, oh man, I miss basketball. I miss football, watching live games, not this stuff where they're replaying Duke and Virginia basketball games on ESPNU or ESPN2. I'm not sure which one it is. I miss live sports. Give me some baseball. Give me some soccer. Give me some hockey. Give me some golf. It don't matter. I miss it. I miss live sports a lot. Yes, I will watch old games. I'm not a guy here, me personally, that'll come on and talk about it and replay and try to relive old games. There are podcasts about that, podcasters that do that, and honestly, I listen to one that they do a very good job of reliving those moments of old games, older games, trying to help us rekindle some of those same memories, rekindle some of those same thoughts in our head we had when somebody hit a shot, or when somebody missed a tackle, or when someone caught an interception. I am here for those moments. And those podcasts, there are places for that. But man, I miss live sports a lot, and I can't wait for it to come back. I'm sure hope it's tomorrow. I wish it was today. I'm not sure when, but when they come back, we will all be happy. Thank you for listening to the episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Once again, that is at jstevens07. Remember to always subscribe, rate, and review. It's a great way for people that are searching for new podcasts to listen to come across this one. Then remember to always get the word out about the podcast via word of mouth. The things that we enjoy in life, we are more willing and somewhat wired to tell other people about. So no matter if this was your first episode or if you have been listening to episode 1, be sure to people know about the podcast. This has been episode 78 of the Jay Stevens Podcast. I'll see you next time.